Rudo had mentioned to me that given enough time, one day Zora's domain would thaw out and the Zoras would be freed. I found that to be unsatisfactory. Knowing that the Zoras were still suffering under the ice, I had to do something about it immediately. I admit that this is a cute little secret way of getting the fire arrows in the game. Not that it's how I got them. If anything, the dawning light just sort of reminded me of them. Yes, somehow or another, I already knew how to use them. I don't know where I had gotten this knowledge from, but more fragmented memories came back to me, and something about sealing the water temple, whether it be defeating Dark Link or Morpha, brought out my memories of how to use them. The magical incantation for the arrows causes glowing runes to appear across the arrowhead before it bursts with elemental power. Navi thought I was crazy, talking about memories of how to do impossible things, and she was certain that this plan of mine wasn't going to work. Going back to Zora's domain with this newly found knowledge, I knew that at the very least, I had to try. Navi was astounded that it had worked. Somehow my powers were growing stronger than even the sages had anticipated, but I didn't regard it much. I worked on rounding up the Zoras and getting their attention. They were relieved that I had freed them, but they understood that they would still be vulnerable to Ganondorf's wrath. I suggested that they all pack up what they could and flee to Zora's River, seeking shelter at Lon Lon Ranch. The Zoras weren't prepared to seem cowardly. They were warriors and ready to fight against Ganondorf, especially considering that before King Zora was frozen, he was planning to ally with Darunia. I admitted to feeling happy with this knowledge. The splintered alliances of Hyrule were uniting against a common enemy again. The Zoras were confident that we could win, knowing that the Hero of Time was leading them, and thus the resistance against Ganondorf was born. Fortunately, after some convincing, they agreed to move to Lon Lon Ranch in the hopes that we could gather more forces. Needless to say, I had just inadvertently become the leader of a rebellion, and I still had no idea what I was doing. Even Navi commented about how quickly I had to grow up in more ways than one. Still, I needed help, advice, so of course there was only one place to go. As I mentioned, Impa's old house in Kakariko had become the meeting place outside of the Temple of Light for the sages. I had hoped that Rairu and the others, maybe even Impa, would be there to help instruct me on where to go next. So I went to Kakariko, and then I saw the smoke. The town was on fire, seeming to erupt particularly from the Skulltula house. People were running for their lives, and I could see why. The game doesn't show it, but Ganondorf's minions were attacking. It was a raid. People were trying to find shelter from the creatures. I took to fighting them off to give the villagers a chance. That's when I noticed Sheik standing there, standing cautiously over the well. What the game doesn't show was that Dark Link was there as well, gloating about how it was too late. Ganondorf was now ready to unleash a most powerful weapon. Sheik and I attempted to fight him, but he was done toying with me like he did in the Water Temple. He easily overpowered us both. Dark was about to finish me off when suddenly I was saved, not by Sheik, but by someone very unexpected. It was the old beggar man, still hooded in his cloak. He was somehow able to block the attack with an unknown weapon, and then drive the shadow away with a blinding white light. I was about to ask how he had done that, when suddenly the frame over the well was blasted away. As I tended to Sheik, it was apparent to me that after all these years, it had happened. The evil that was buried beneath Kakariko had finally been unleashed. It began moving over the surrounding area, tearing through the houses and buildings in its wake. I drew my sword, ready to fight. When I finally came to, Sheik told me that the old man had used the same power from before to drive the creature off. Sheik admitted to himself that he didn't know who the man was, and he was gone before he could question him. Specifically, I played the Song of Storms to bring on the rain, to put out the fire. The truth of the story was, centuries ago, an evil shadow spirit roamed free across the land of Hyrule. It was a very powerful and dangerous creature. The founder of Kakariko Village managed to seal the creature in the cavern beneath his house. The Skulltula family disturbed the creature years ago when they raided the man's house, and as the curse consumed them, the beast regained strength. Ganondorf had been planning to help it increase in strength to unleash it on Hyrule. The monster would prove to be Ganondorf's most powerful servant, able to cover the land in a spell of perpetual darkness. Sheik revealed to me that it was why Impa was gone this entire time. She had been at the Shadow Temple, attempting to destroy the creature's weapon, so that it couldn't be used should the creature get free. We both agreed, however, that Kakariko, as well as the entire mountain, was no longer safe. Sheik implored me to go and help Impa at the temple, while he helped the villagers evacuate to safety. I also had him make sure that the Gorons were alerted as well, and that everyone should head to Lon Lon Ranch, bringing as many supplies as they could carry. For now, I went on to the graveyard. I quickly realized that the lens of truth would be useful here, but it was also metaphorical in a sense, as simply being here was seeing the truth enough. It's just as the whispering voices said. The Shadow Temple was the record place of Hyrule's bloody history of greed and hatred, a vault in which all the secrets were kept and buried. Wearing these things is like walking on ice. I don't get why they're so popular among fans. Personally, before I got my wings, I experimented with them in an attempt to achieve genuine flight with them. The walls were made of skulls, and rather than puzzles, I'll be frank, this place was filled with traps. I have no idea why a sacred temple would be like this, but I'm guessing that whatever was buried here, the royal family didn't want people to know about it. Forget what they might teach you in school, or in subsequent subpar sequels in the game franchise. The gods didn't specifically make the land of Hyrule, so much as they did the entire planet. The land that is now called Hyrule did not always belong to the Hylians. Long ago, there was once a different kingdom that stood in its place on prosperous lands. They were a peaceful people, and not well equipped. For the progenitors of Hyrule, they were ripe for the picking. The Hylians invaded and conquered this land in a bloody conflict. They routed the royal family and drove them out. They went into hiding, and no one knows what happened. At least, not yet. This history was forgotten, abandoned, and replaced by Hylian society, but the record of it was kept here, in this temple, buried, but not forgotten. The biggest mystery surrounding this temple was why it was so messed up. Why were there so many nightmarish things put in here? And more importantly, what did the royal family of Hyrule have to do with any of this? There is a ferry to the underworld harbored on a river of souls here, waiting to launch at the command of the royal family. Repressed memories of what I had found at the bottom of the well came back to me, suddenly clarified with a calmer, adult mind. And everything began to make sense to me. The guillotines, the execution blades, the chains, the various torture devices, and the blood stains across the floors. I finally realized that this temple was no place of worship. It was a torture dungeon. This was where the enemies of Hyrule would be brought to be tortured horrifically before being killed. Actions so dark, performed so deep underground, no light from the surface would ever reach. It might have been speculation on my part, but I began to piece together what all this meant. The evil shadow spirit terrorizing Hyrule wasn't a random encounter. It was created by the violent acts and atrocities conducted in the Shadow Temple. After it had first been unleashed in Hyrule, the Kakariko leader realized that the creature would be attracted to the horrendous acts of violence, of torture, and pain. So he conducted rituals in the cavern beneath his house to lure the creature down there. I didn't know what Impa was hoping to accomplish with all this, but the cycle could not be perpetuated, especially considering that with Ganondorf's hold over the land and the use of the Shadow Temple to bring his more dangerous underlings to this world, the Shadow Creature's power would only grow stronger. It had to end. When I entered the final chamber, I could hear the sounds of a struggle from down below. Impa was fighting the shadow spirits, and it didn't sound good. I jumped down ready to fight, surprised that my fall was cushioned by the giving surface. Impa was in bad shape, bruised and bloodied. Before I could help her, she was lifted into the air and shaken about, much like Sheik was. She was thrown across the chamber. It was clear she couldn't destroy the creature's weapon, and I soon realized that we were standing on it, an enormous bongo drum. creature revealed itself to me. Bongo Bob, the phantom shadow beast. Impa strained through her pain to explain it to me. The songs played on the drum were part of a ritual. If Bongo Bongo continued to play, the spell would cover Hyrule in a cloud of darkness, bringing on a great storm and causing earthquakes. She tried to fight it, but even her keen sight could not penetrate the darkness. Fortunately, I had the lens of truth. In hindsight, I found it strange that I would be fighting an opponent comprised of a pair of giant hands, but we'll get to that. The game doesn't go into it, but Impa was harboring a lot of guilt in light of these events. The Sheikah were not only the attendants of Hyrule's royalty, but they were also the keepers of Hyrule's dark secret. They knew the truth about Bongo Bongo, where he came from and why, and how he was sealed up beneath the village. This was the first I had heard about the sages' plan in depth. The idea that all this time the sages were planning to seal Ganondorf away, much like they had done with Bongo Bongo. I had objections to that, but I kept my feelings to myself for now. All I could keep in mind was the fact that Zelda was indeed alive and safe, and that she and I would be reunited soon. I was returned to the surface. I found that Kakariko was being empty, with the Gorons helping the villagers move out. The giant Gorons also left the mountain and headed for Lon Lon Ranch. Unlike what is shown in the game, I didn't have to go on a long and complicated trading quest for eye drops to get the sword from him. He just offered to fix the broken hilt that I got from the carpenter. Considering that the giant's knife was a useful tool, to have an even more powerful and sturdy weapon was definitely welcome. Meanwhile, because it was clear that we were evacuating Kakariko, I went to Impa's house to help clear out the headquarters. Considering that I didn't know where to go to awaken the final sage, I figured that doing this would help me think, and as I was going through all the stuff we had to move, I found them.